Analysts are projecting a slight improvement in Ghana's economic growth with the reopening of the Quartey International Airport to international flights and arrivals. According to economist Professor Quartey, growth could grow beyond the 0.9% projected by the government to about 1.5% of gross domestic product for this year. He cites the hospitality subsector, particularly conferences, hotels and conferences, and as the biggest beneficiaries. He joins us via Zoom to expand on this. Thank you very much, Professor Quartey. So explain to us why you're so optimistic. All right, if you could please unmute.
Right.
Yes.
Good evening to you, Israel, and good evening to your discerning
Good evening,
viewers.
Prof.
Yes, I'm being cautiously optimistic about this because we need to respect the health protocols as we open the airport. But if we do, then I think a lot of businesses would be stimulated. We would get a lot of imports and exports through the airport, which brings in revenue. And once we get revenue, certainly it's going to boost government activities. We also see the hospitality industry, tourism and the restaurants, the hotels, being in business. They employ people, they engage in economic activity. That certainly is going to affect the other subsectors. Agriculture, for instance, when hotels are operating, when the restaurants are operating, agricultural production will certainly have some demand. So it's certainly going to affect all the other key sectors, industry, electricity, water, and so on and so forth. So we're likely going to see an increase in aggregate demand. And the respective supply responses would also kick in. And certainly that is likely to affect our GDP positively. So again, I am cautiously optimistic that we may hit our 1.5% GDP growth rate instead of the 0.9% initially projected.
All right, so I am looking at it, I want us to look at it this way. Government is projecting 0.9%. Don't you think that government may have factored in the reopening of the airport into its 0.9% projection?
Yes, but I'm not sure government really plan to open at this time. It is the numbers that inform the decision. So at the time the projection was made, I'm not too sure that they knew for certain that they were going to open the airport at this point. But what I'm saying is there are multiplier effects. Once you open and you manage the pandemic very well, you manage the spread very well, you may have modest projections, but we are likely to have some multiplier effects which might be bigger than you initially anticipated.
And then again, if you're looking at you talk about tourism and the fact that we're going to have people coming in and the hospitality sector is likely to benefit. But if you're looking at tourism doesn't look like it's going to go, it's going to be on the uptick with the opening of the airport. Because generally across the world, people are not that keen on traveling as of now. So I'm not so sure how that is going to improve our tourist numbers.
There are certainly some who come in for business, and it's not just business, there's leisure. So as they work and earn money, they would like to tour parts of the country. So certainly tourism would pick up. Yes, initially, as you open, you will not find a lot of huge inflows, people moving for tourism, etc. But over time, when they are sure that safety is really assured, then you see the numbers picking up. If you look across Europe and many other places, there is still an increase in tourism, although not to the level that one would have anticipated around this time of the year. But gradually, I think tourism would also pick up, and other sectors as well. As we gradually open the economy, we open part of the country, education and many other places, as we gradually open. And I believe a lot of these things will kick in and our GDP is likely to improve on condition that we respect the protocols and it doesn't lead to a surge in the cases.
All right, and I also want you to look into the crystal ball and tell us what does next year look like?
Well, again, being cautiously optimistic, I think next year might look slightly better than this year, provided we don't see any new pandemic or anything coming in. We are likely to gradually come out of the recession, and then we see the economy moving back to its normal position. It might take a while, but I'm sure we'll gradually get there. But also, it depends on the extent to which we manage our budget deficit. Election years have been quite problematic, and this year being an election year with also COVID-related expenditure, if we don't overspend or we don't have such a huge budget deficit that will leave us to clean the mess in the next 3 or so years, then we are likely to see better prospects next year.
Now, since you brought in the factor or the election year factor, I'd like to ask, did you factor that into your cautious optimism of the growth going up from 0.9% to 1.5%? Because generally in election years, people are indecisive and investors would like to hold on and see how the election goes before they come in to invest.
Yeah, but also you will note that during election years, people spend. Political parties spend on campaign, they spend on T-shirts. Money changes hands during election year. So it's certainly going to stimulate aggregate demand. So yes, some investors might be cautious, but consumption would also increase. And all of this factor into our GDP calculation.
All right. I like to put it this way, that yes, investors may be cautious, but the politicians may not be so cautious in spending and making sure they win the election.
Exactly. That's the point.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Peter Quartey.